a Torx 30. This is a Torx 30 screw. The one down below is a hex. It's a 7mm hex. Just as the front, you have to use your screwdriver to kind of depress those clips from behind and pry this up gently so you can disconnect your switch connector on the door. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's also a 7mm hex head bolt here as well, just like the one down below. Got to come out. Now to pop out your handle, give this a little tug and you'll find that there are two latches, plastic latches. Be careful. Take a screwdriver and try to find them and push down on one. Get a little finger in there and push down on the other, and the whole assembly pops loose from its gripping point on that entire piece. Whole thing comes out. And now we're going to try to just lift that whole door panel up and off. The wire and connector can very carefully be sent back out. And now you have access to the inside of the door. And by the way, you lift up and off these individual hooks in the door, so they have places where they sit into the door panel, and then you reset the door. And next you want to peel back the moisture barrier. You'll see that the center of that panel has a little mounting piece. So I just go ahead and go around it. I can get to all of the individual pieces that I have to drill out or try and remove. One way or the other. When I put this back up, I'll just be using some good insulating tape. Now we want to pry that off. That just fits as a groove that fits right down on top of that door. Now we're going to try to remove those pieces, or at least loosen them up. I don't want to take them off just yet, but I want to drill out the window studs, or window right here, those pieces that are connecting the window. And then we'll work on the frame itself of the regulator. And I use a 7/16 on these. And down here at the bottom they have two rivets. So we'll have to drill those out. And I take these off. The motor itself has 3 rivets. I have to drill those out. All will be replaced with screws. The kit that I have came from Rock Auto. It had all of the screws and hardware to assemble this back. So I'll loosen this, but then I'm going to go after and try and drill that window out. It just so happens that the window's taped right in a good spot where I can get to it. So I'll get to it and save you the time of watching me drill. Okay, so we took off that piece, and a lot of you have seen how you hit these rivet centers with punches. Some guys use a pointy punch. I just use a flat punch, and that's because the sons of guns fit. Anyway, getting to this, a little surprise. On the older ones, these actually have, this has a screw where you can pull this loose off of your a rod that opens up the latch on the door. I'm going to try to get the old unit out, but if I can't, and I guess surprise surprise, I'm going to have to redo this and use screws, bolts and nuts to refasten that. So stay tuned. Okay, so far so good. I took out my 2 track bolts. These hold the forward track and this back track. I've lowered the window down and pulled this trim off. It just clamps right on and pulls right off. And next I'm going to just try to get the back track up and out just a tad, and I'll have to pull it loose from the other outside rubber, and hopefully this glass will be able to pull out. So that'll be the next position. Okay, so I dropped the window and I got it loose from the back track and the front track, and it takes a little bit of cajoling, a little prying with the screwdriver from behind here. As you can see, this whole assembly comes loose, and with the window all the way down inside there, it's off the track. Now, of course, it's going to be a lot of fun trying to put it back on, but I need to have this loose so I can get the window out. And so we'll push it down a little bit more and bring it up and get it out of the way. Let's see what happens. So you can see how I've got it hiked up just a little bit out of the door and back, and hopefully I can get my glass up and out. And for me, the best way to get that glass out was to come out through the passenger side. There's more room for this to come out. And also note that this still has some of the rivet sections left, and I have to drill those out. That kind of made it interesting to get clearance through here, but that's what you want to do, is bring the through out of the door on the passenger side. And just a little side note, I had to give these a little punch, these threads at the top of that assembly, to punch them in. They just didn't kind of want to drop out. Just a note. Okay, just as I suspected, boo-hoo, poor me, that assembly is not going to clear this rod. So I'm going to have to punch these rivets out and come back in assembly with screws and nuts, so I can get that off the rod and get the rod out of the way and get this whole regulator assembly up and out of the door. And just for fun, I'll show you that I got a drill on one of them. Okay, just for you guys who want to see it. Trust me, you go a little bit more and it pops off. Okay, so I've got it out, and here's this sneaky Pete little devil with a plastic collar. I love these things. Whoever invented them obviously made a fortune. Anyway, I gotta finagle that off, and that piece will come off, and I can get the rod down. Okay, so I got the rod tucked down in here, and we should be able to pull this puppy out, or pretty close to it. I may have to put the camera down and just do it. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull this whole assembly out, and I'll show it to you in a second. And I'm going to try to do this with one hand holding the camera. I've got just enough of it out, so it's stuck around a cord and a cable, but you get the idea. Okay, so here's the old one, and this is the Fomoco. Apparently the cable assembly just came disconnected. Maybe it could have been fixed, I don't know. But it's out and it's going to get replaced. Okay, so here's the new one. You can see everything is attached, and hopefully I'll remember how to put it back in, and it'll all go in just nice and neat. Alright, after I've slid the whole assembly in with the motor forward, making sure it's going to get fitted up here, I just kind of stick it right in there with these studs, and that holds the assembly kind of loosely for me, so I can start putting in other screws. Okay, so reassembly is going backwards. I'm going to put the door latch system back on, and then I can get around it and start putting these bolts on for the window regulator itself. I'm going to use hardware that was actually provided. They gave me 2 sets of hardware, probably knowing I'd have to use some of it for these 3 extra ones. And I'm probably going to put those on the door with these particular panhead type screws, and these with the hex head screws I'm going to use that it's a little further recessed. I'll be using them for the actual regulator. And another little tip is I don't crank down on these top studs, because that lets this whole assembly move and gets my big hand some room to get behind here and deal with these nuts and the screws for your lever. Just a tip. Now, for those of you who haven't done this before, I'm not going to lie to you. If you've got fairly good sized hands, getting these nuts behind here for the motor bracket are tough. So what I do is I just try to sneak that nut right in between my fingers, get back down in behind this, and then I can guide the nut right to it and gently thread it on in, because it's tough. Just another tip. Alright, now I'm going to go anchor these 2 bolts for that regulator assembly. So I've got everything pretty much bolted in, but when this unit was delivered, the regulator was all the way to the bottom, so I had to hook the stuff back up, let the motor bring it up into these slots where we can bring the window in and fasten that up too. This is a 2003 Mercury. It's a little different on the older models, as I said before. So let's just see if we can't get it into position. Look at that. And I think I can see, I don't know if you can see, but everything's lined up, and I'll get the glass in. Okay, everything's back in except for the trim pieces, and I'm going to try this. I've already tried it to make sure that it's all gently. I'm going to try that gently. Glass does not like to be forced. So if you have a problem where it's binding, stop immediately and undo everything until you get to the point where you think you found the problem. So make sure you get all of these things, tightened down snug, and we'll see what happens here. We can get this pretty much down to the bottom. Make sure that you watch out that you feed the connector for the motor back behind your regulator here, because you don't want that to get caught up and it gets snapped. You don't have a problem there. So that goes down. You can see the tape that was holding up, the tape marks that were holding up the glass. It sounds like it's going up just fine. Okay, so I'm just going to button all the stuff back up like I took it off. And that's one repair. It took a little bit longer than it should have. Thanks for watching. Okay, it's all buttoned up, but let's try it again to make sure. And listen for any binding. Okay, it's all the way down. Let's go back up. Very nice. Job completed.